Welcome back to Two Gals and a Glass Half Full. Today's topic is one that I'm super passionate about, that I think is super important. We have Lindsey on, and she is a sports dietitian. And I think gearing in females, which I think is so important because there's females and males are different, and there's so much out there to teach our young athletes and our athletes how to improve their sports performance, but improve it by eating good nutrition and fueling their bodies appropriately so they can get through those long competitions. But before we get started, Dr. Jess, what is in your glass?
So I've got my water bottle today. So I've got my lovely, logo that keeps me like focused on, living that healthy life as best we can. And it reminds me that 80% is good enough. So I try and read it every day. But I've got some infused water, some lemon and cucumber and mint kind of floating around in there. So I just drink more when it tastes a little bit better. And plus you get a little bit of the nutrients all mixed in there. So Dr. Bobbie, what's in your glass?
I am having some organic ginger lemonade kombucha. I love kombucha. I love having like one a day. I just feel like my stomach just feels so much better. Um, Getting a little bit of the probiotics and stuff in me. So
I love it. And so with us today, we've got Lindsey Cortes. And before we do intros for Lindsey, what's in your glass?
I have three. Can I share all three?
Yeah, absolutely.
absolutely.
I'm always curious about what's in people's glasses.
Well, as I might talk about later, I have two little ones who are with the babysitter. So I'm locked in my closet. So I've got lots of beverages for the next few hours. I've got a full water bottle of water. I've got another water bottle that actually has emergency in it because with the little ones, yeah, we've got runny noses. And so I did a packet of emergency yesterday and today because I'm feeling it. So and then I do have coffee. It says get it done because I am mostly with the kids at home and I have a babysitter come once a week or once every other week so that I can get it done with work, podcast, and just, the stuff that I'm more passionate about on the career side. I'm focusing while I have a babysitter here. So definitely have coffee. I love coffee. One of my first jobs was in a coffee shop when I was 16 years old. And even before that, I think I liked coffee even before 16 years old. So
Yeah,
that's what I've got.
I get it. No, I'm a coffee drinker myself. And so it's like, I know that there's like other things that you could do. But I honestly just enjoy coffee. I
I
like
do
the
too.
flavor of coffee.
Mhm.
I do. So
Me too.
yeah. So Lindsey, tell us a little bit about you. Like what's your background?
Sure. My background is I grew up just as a lover of sports. I participated in multiple sports as a child. Um, and then I really got into gymnastics. That was kind of my primary sport through high school. And in high school, I also participated in track and field. So between gymnastics and then doing track, I really excelled in like the sprint power sports. And it did provide me the opportunity to compete track and field in college. Into trying to decide what sort of major I wanted to do, I was interested really in just the physical body and science. And I didn't know much about nutrition, but I had enough awareness about food and body in high school, and some interest in nutrition to the point where my mom kind of suggested to me that could be a career path and to help other people with their diets, just as I had kind of, in her eyes, I was, quote, good at my diet in high school. And so I pursued that. But I think as I pursued nutrition and I enjoyed studying it in college, so I never kind of looked back, but I always loved how it related to sport and performance and the physical body. And so I was interested in medical nutrition, but I cared a little bit less about healing diseases and more about preventing concerns, and one step further than that, optimizing your health and performance. So not just how can we prevent bad stuff, but how can we make things better with the power of food. And so then I went on to get a master's degree in sports nutrition specifically, combined with completing the requirements to become a registered dietitian, some extra internship and schooling required there. My first job was in a clinical setting in a hospital background, which was a great experience. And then I kept working my way up so that I could work in sport, which was my dream. I worked at the University of Georgia Athletics in their sports nutrition department, with their athletic teams. I worked at Florida State University with their athletic teams. So that was SEC, ACC. And then I took a job, a little bit of career shift, but I ended up working with US Air Force Special Operations. And so it wasn't sport performance, but it was optimizing the human body with nutrition and fuel. I have no shame or regrets to admit that that is how I did find my husband. We are married. We have 2 beautiful children. And I ultimately did leave that job to pursue a life with him. And at that point, I really wanted to start my own business. So I did. I established my own business. I started doing contracting work with the military. We moved to San Antonio, Texas. I started working with UTSA, University of Texas, San Antonio, in their athletic department. And then I established my own online consulting business. And what started, working with a variety of people, I really niched down. I was thinking of all my experiences. I really want to work mostly on athletes. I really love working with the high school and college athlete population just because I felt that it was underserved. And those are my experiences, that there was more help needed there. And then I dug even deeper and I was like, I just really, like, my heart was just calling towards the female athletes. And mind you, I had just come working with Air Force Special Operations, which was a male dominated field. So I was like, I just want to get back to sport and working with these girls and women that I felt really needed more support. Those were kind of my favorite clients that I'd worked with. And I wanted to dial that in. And so I really specialized in female athlete nutrition after all those years of experiences. And then just, that's my kind of career progression, but a little bit more about me. Even after college, like I said, I did sprints, I did pole vault in college. And then I continued with running and kind of just building up distance. I actually did come from a distance family. My dad was a marathon runner. My sisters did cross country. And so I was the oddball who did the sprints and power sports, which I loved and still do. But then I, got into 5Ks, 10Ks. I've run 2 marathons here in Texas, got into trail running. The last few years since having children, I'm not racing, but I still love going to the gym and trying to, I get back to running. I love it. I hate stroller running. So I'd much rather drop the kids off at childcare and go on a treadmill or go on a run alone, but they enjoy it once a week or so. So that's where I'm at right now and a little bit more about my background.
I love that.
That's awesome. I'm just trying to start that stroller running. And
It's
tough.
The stroller run is tough. I'm like at the point now where our boys, my youngest is 3.5. And so like, he's pretty good. Like if he's home with my husband, it's on the weekend, like he's like, he can kind of like bounce around with my husband. Whereas like before when they were like so little, it's like, well, if he needs to be out mowing or something like that, then like I would push them in the stroller. And so it kept me running that whole time. But let me tell you, like, it's a lot harder run.
Twice the work, and your form gets all screwed up. And I will share postpartum after having 2 kids. Like I've seen a pelvic floor specialist and like, it's too hard with the stroller. I need to focus on my form and my breathing to make sure that I'm taking care of my body. Yeah,
absolutely. So as far as like, working with these athletes, like how can athletes cultivate this positive mindset towards fueling their bodies for optimal performance? So I like that mindset.
Absolutely. Well, I do think, and why I mentioned I do have a passion for working with, I love working with everybody, just so you know, I'm not ageist. I love all ages, but the earlier you start talking to girls and about nutrition and body in a positive way, it's just so much easier to cultivate and build a good mindset around it, as opposed to changing somebody's mindset, which we can do. We can change our mindset. We can always change and improve, but the younger, the better. And I think so, somewhere around our teen years or pre-puberty, for most people, most girls, especially as we're hitting puberty, we start to develop an awareness about our bodies, combined with, you know, social media. And back in my day, it wasn't social media, but it was just TV ads, it was magazines. We start picking up on the idea that food affects our body, food affects our health. And so we really just want to start using language that food can positively impact your body. Food can positively impact our health. There's a lot of fear mongering in our society of don't eat that food, something bad will happen. What if we just shifted that to eat this food, something good will happen? Because I think at the end of the day, all food is good. We don't survive without food. And I like to go to the extreme. Mountain Dew is good. Because if you, like, again, to the extreme, if you're starving, if you haven't eaten in 2 days, if your blood sugar's crashing, if you're diabetic, Mountain Dew will save your life. If you've taken too much insulin, that's what I meant. If you're diabetic, taking too much insulin, you're going into a hypoglycemic episode, like, Mountain Dew will save your life. Great. If you're an athlete, you're bonking, Mountain Dew will help you keep going. Cool. So at the end of the day, all food, even to the extreme of something like that, this is providing a fuel source to keep you going. Now, that's an extreme example, but I think that helps us remember that, like, oh yeah, there's really no such thing as a bad food. There really isn't. All food is good. Now we can think, okay, well, there's a good, maybe there's a better, maybe there's a best. I even might want to switch that. There might be a good, better, best in different situations, right? So maybe for one person, I'm just going to keep going with the carbohydrate sugar example here. We want to eat something before a workout or a practice. We might say, okay, you want simple digesting carbohydrates. So you can have a banana on toast. That sounds like a great choice. But for somebody else, they're like, ooh, I'm going to throw that up. That's too much volume in my stomach. Okay, well, what better for you might be a fruit juice. But then for somebody else, they're like, oh my gosh, too acidic. I have acid reflux. Okay, not good for you. Let's try a bowl of oatmeal, right? So there's a good, better, best, but it varies per individual and per situation and scenario. But I think that mindset of there's no such thing as a bad food. It's all good. So now let's apply it to your life. What do you need? What works for you? What are your goals? How does it make you feel? And you can figure out, so there's no such thing as bad, but what's the good, what's the better, what's the best in this scenario? So I think that's my first, like, this is just a mindset we have to adopt. All food is good. And, unapologetically, because we're going to see so many ads and hear so much discussion and talk about don't eat that, or that's a bad food, or this will do you harm. And we just unapologetically have to ignore that or fight against it. I mean, like, that's literally not true.
Mhm.
It's food.
Right.
I had a gymnast one time I was working with, and great kid, great family. And she just kept coming to me and she's like, how do I get stronger? Like, and kid trying, like, when the kid shows up and tries every day, puts a whole hard effort. So I finally looked at her one day and I was like, what are you eating? And I knew the family. The family's very healthy. And I also talked to the mom too and found out, like, she was just restricting herself in, like, only one serving of rice. You're working out 4.5 hours a day. Like, you might need a little bit more of that good food to actually fuel your body. And so it was just amazing when she heard that and she started then fueling her body more appropriately. Like, she started getting the skills she wanted and she started to be able to do better. So it was just really nice to see that. But you have to be so careful in the way you say that to a child, because you are formulating what they believe about themselves and what they believe about food and everything through there.
And I think it's so important in that situation that you did bring attention to her, because subconsciously, if we're not having positive conversations about food, subconsciously, adolescents, young adults, all of us are soaking in information around us that is fear mongering. That is what I like to call, like, full of diet culture of restriction, or don't eat this or eat less. That is just a huge, like, in our society. And I understand why it got to be that way. I just don't think it's the right approach to continue. But our society has a lot of, like, eat less discussion. And that's subconsciously gets into people's mind. Oh, I should only have 1 cup of rice. It's like, well, what if you perform optimally at 1.5 cups of rice? Like, so subconsciously there's a level of being mindful restriction that a lot of people adopt because of what we hear and pick up around us. And if you have that conversation, open people up to the idea that fuel can benefit you more, it can really help with that as well.
Absolutely. I think that kind of blends right into a topic that is not one that's like commonly talked about in the athlete population. But what are the key signs of REDS? And what is that?
Okay. REDS stands for Relative Energy Deficiency in Sport. It's a newer term in the past 10 years that encompasses a syndrome of a variety, I think, of negative performance and health outcomes. We're going to date back a little bit just because if you've never heard this term before, perhaps a different term, you might have heard of the female athlete triad. So the triad is three things of low energy intake. They used to call it anorexia, but it really just is not quite eating enough. Low energy intake. It's menstrual dysfunction. They used to call it amenorrhea, lack of a menstrual cycle, but in all reality, it's just menstrual dysfunction or hormone dysfunction in the female athlete. And then the third one is bone issues. They used to be specific and say it was osteoporosis, but it is actually just low bone mineral density. Those are three things in the female athlete triad. But what we've learned through more research over the past 20-ish years is that a couple of things. Hey, men can experience hormone issues too. So it's not just about menstruation. It's hormone issues. And it's not just about having osteoporosis. It's low bone mineral density, and low energy intake actually causes more things than just these two. Low energy intake. Sorry, I'm a visual person if you're following my fingers. Low energy intake can also cause cardiovascular issues. It can also cause GI dysfunction. It can also cause more injuries, more musculoskeletal injuries. It can also cause other issues in your endocrine function. It can cause vitamin and mineral malabsorption. So there's a variety of issues, health and performance, that actually all stem from low energy intake. But it's not just like, oh, low energy intake. I'm going to throw out a number just to put this in perspective for people. It's not like, oh, I only ate 1,000 calories today, which most people will agree that's very low energy intake. You could be eating 3,000 calories, 4,000 calories, which for most people sounds like a lot, and still have REDS because it's all relative. It's low energy intake relative to your sport, meaning relative to how much are you burning off.
Right.
So you can be eating 3,000 calories, but if you're burning off 6,000, not enough. Or I might even add to that. You can be eating 3,000 calories, burning off 2,000, which is less, but what's left over, you've got 1,000 calories left over, still might not be enough for optimal functioning of everything else. Right. So I think in our society too, there's was a big push for like energy balance, you know, energy intake minus energy output. We want to be in balance. But what people who don't have higher education in nutrition, like registered dietitians and sports dietitians or other health professionals, don't understand is that it's not just about what we expend out. We have to keep nutrition and energy in as well. How do our organs function? How do we grow hair? How do we build hormones and enzymes? You need to utilize food and nutrition in your body, not just out. So this concept of energy balance, it at the end of the day, like we get down into the scientific weeds, it is correct. But how the average person tried to manipulate, on my watch, I burned X amount of calories, so I will eat X amount, didn't translate into optimal health because they weren't getting enough energy in their body. So again, REDS is when you have energy deficiency or low energy availability relative to your sport and your physical demands. And because of that, not only can your sport and your physical function decline because you're fatiguing more easily, your muscles are sore, you're not adapting to your training, you might be getting more muscle injuries, but then internally we start deteriorating. Our bone mineral density can decrease, which can cause bone health issues or injuries. Our hormones start dipping and flatlining, which not only affects our mood, our mental health, but can affect our reproductive function and will affect your sport as well. You need estrogen and testosterone and insulin-like growth factor to be a good, strong athlete and respond to your training. again, you don't have enough energy in, your digestion's going to be all off because you need digestive enzymes and you need your hormones to do proper digestion. So did I answer your question? I can go on quite a tangent.
No, I love it because this is
Okay.
something that like it's not like when I was in PT school, like nobody ever talked about this, right? And so
No.
then when you're in the clinic and you're working with a female athlete because of an injury, right? And then there's like multiple injuries and you start kind of learning a little bit more. It's like, wait a minute, what's our underlying factor here? Like there's got to be something. I mean, this doesn't make sense. And so it's like,
Yeah.
the athletes putting in their time in the, wherever they're training with, whatever coach they're working with, they're doing everything they should be doing, right? But it still isn't working. And so when I first heard about REDS, it was like, oh my goodness, I can think of so many people I've worked with in the past that probably went more down this route. And so finding somebody that understands the nutrition aspect of balancing this out, the mental health aspect of balancing this out, because sometimes there is that negative correlation with food, especially if it's in a sport where, how you look in front of a crowd really matters. Now there's can be a little bit of a negative association with food. And then we have all these fad diets of, we're going to do this like keto and only keto or only this or only that. And that doesn't fuel your body for your sport. And so it's just, I'm really glad that you are knowledgeable about this because I just think that this condition is more common than we think. And it's something that is very treatable, honestly, very treatable.
Absolutely. And going back to the beginning of the conversation where I just told you my background, I established my own practice in 2018, which was 4 years after the term REDS was coined. But even as I had working with clients, I always kind of had clients on the side of my full-time jobs too. Like, I think that female athlete, that high school, college age female athlete that I was so drawn to working with, I think all of them had some degree of REDS for a variety of reasons. And my approach to it, I never diagnosed because that wasn't really something we did back then. We didn't diagnose with REDS. We do now, though it takes multifactorial team and a lot of things to assess. But I think back to those clients, I'm like, yeah, they all had REDS. And my approach towards helping it was always just actually starting with the mindset to figure out what piece is off here. Is it that they're fearing food? Is it that they're not understanding how carbohydrates work in their body? Is it sport? Are they eating well, like their mom and dad eat, but then they're not identifying that they have higher needs because of sport? Like, what is it mindset wise, education wise, that's not clicking for them? And I always started there as opposed to like giving a diagnosis. I kind of just tried to understand what was going on in their head as to why they're not fueling properly. And we started there. And that's the approach I've always taken with my practice. I do specialize in helping female athletes overcome REDS, but I don't always fully diagnose it. We just kind of get to the core here of what are we missing here? Is it your nutrient timing that's off? Is it your carbs that are off? Is it total calories that are off? And why is that happening?
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's definitely something that sometimes a diagnosis, I think, is necessary to get that mindset shift change in the individual. Sometimes that is important to say, like, for real, like, we have to take this seriously if it's
this is a thing.
Right. If it's not being taken seriously. But if it is being taken seriously and there is like the I want to feel better. Like, I don't want to feel like this. Then like not making it so medical jargony, like I'm broken, kind of feeling. It's like, it's not that you're broken. It's just, you're just not getting what you need. And so your body's not optimized for performance. There's nothing broken about you.
Well, exactly. And I think you hit the nail on the head there with what I was trying to express, because this is a totally fixable and avoidable thing.
Mhm.
And so I never wanted to, I have since specializing this, I've come across people who kind of say like, oh, I have REDS. And I'm like, this is not like I have rheumatoid arthritis thing.
Right.
Like, this
Right.
is not I have celiac disease thing. This is not this is something that, you know, you are experiencing a variety of symptoms because your nutrition isn't matching your needs right now. And we can absolutely fix that. Every day you can
Yes,
get better at this. Like starting with right
absolutely.
now, your very next meal, you can improve that situation.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Totally different way of approaching it. And I, you know, there's some things where a diagnosis is necessary. I do think understanding the symptoms is important because
Yes.
that is how you realize that nutrition is probably the biggest missing link.
Mhm.
And so I think it's important to talk about it, but not to use it as a label, because the labels, they can really stick, and it's especially when the brain is still developing, and you can start to identify in this way.
Right.
And this is not an identity thing. It's literally
No.
just, it's consumption. And how do you understand consumption? That's all it is.
Mhm.
It's not more than that.
And to your
And
point as well, sorry, Dr. Bobbie,
no, go
but
ahead.
I think that too, with the things like the injuries that I'm sure both of you have, you know, a lot of exposure to, um, so many people are just thinking like, my biomechanics are off. I need to do more strengthening. I need to see a PT. I need to wear different shoes. All of those things likely true. But
Mhm.
also when you kind of, it's like, oh, wait, there's, you know, like you were saying, these other symptoms, like why would my bone injuries or repeated tendonitis actually be my nutrition? Yeah, let's having that diagnosis. And if you just, for anybody who's just learning about REDS for the first time, if you just kind of Google search REDS, and maybe even if you can pull up the studies, or even if you go to Google Images, you'll probably see a nice image that's like a spoken wheel with the symptoms that you can experience. And that is just such a good visual of seeing all the different parts of your body, health and performance that can be affected by this.
And I was gonna say, I love how, so, our whole thing is like, how can we make small, sustainable changes? Like, that's the whole point of the podcast. In every aspect of our life, how can we make very small changes to improve our health? And so I love how you said, especially with REDS, athletes can improve it at the next meal. But that doesn't mean they need to go change the entire meal. Like, pick one thing that add in there, and like each
Yeah.
meal you can kind of slowly add in to improve it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it makes it feel much more attainable.
Yeah,
Oh yeah.
absolutely. I think a variety of people, there's a big spectrum of how REDS affects people for how long and how severely. Um, and so some people it might take years to fully recover, and for others it might just take a couple months. But again, knowing that your very next meal, you can make a positive
Mhm.
impact is so empowering. And some people even feel it right away.
Mm.
Within a day. Oh, I feel better. It's like, yeah, now let's keep this up and solve everything completely, you know?
Yeah, I love that. So can you provide some insights into supporting bone health and then preventing stress fractures? So like those overuse injuries in the female athletes.
Sure. Well, I'll just speak specifically to the nutrition piece,
Right.
because again, as I mentioned, there's a variety of reasons for
Mhm.
injuries and bone injuries. But for female athletes, about 90% of your bone mineral content is developed before age 18. The males aren't too far off from that number, but I don't quite remember. Just so I'm going to speak
Yeah.
specific, but it's not too far off. The majority of your bone mineral content is built before age 18. So what is that? That's the years leading up to puberty and a few years after puberty. So we actually, parents do, I think, have a responsibility to just make sure that your child is growing according to growth charts, eating a balanced diet, growing up with a variety of nutrients. This is one reason, a huge reason why we do not ever, as parents or as a culture, I should say, want to encourage restriction or weight loss in a child, because we need those nutrients to grow and develop. And so I really want to express that it's not just about weight or size, like it is our internal need. We need carbs, proteins, fats, calcium, vitamin D, potassium, magnesium. We need so much to build up that bone mineral content before age 18. So we certainly want to encourage a variety of food and making sure we're not restricting throughout those years. Any other little habits of encouraging, milk, dairy, or dark leafy greens for calcium is very helpful. Getting outdoor time for sun, for our vitamin D, eating fish on occasion for vitamin D. These are all just kind of general principles that will help. But again, I really think that for girls around those puberty years, making sure that you do establish your period and then that it is regular throughout your teen years, because estrogen is our most anabolic hormone that helps build that bone mineral content. So all the calcium and vitamin D in the world that I love doesn't do anything if you don't have estrogen in your system. And for the boys, it is testosterone. Testosterone is your anabolic hormone that builds and builds bone. For us girls and women, it is estrogen that does that for us, that will build your bones. So that is the importance of establishing and maintaining a regular menstrual cycle throughout those teen years. So that's a huge red flag that I'm so proud of the, well, I won't speak for every community, but I see a lot of growth over the past 5 years, specifically in the space of nutrition and female sports, talking about the importance of menstrual cycle, especially for our teenage girls. I've never heard teenage girls talk so positively about their period before. Now, do we have a long way to go? Yes, because I'm in my little bubble of people who care about it. There's a big population of people who still don't know. I didn't know when I was a teenager. Like, I knew I was supposed to get a period, but I didn't understand why or that it was such a good thing. I was like, oh, that's for kids, to have kids when you're older. Like, no, I need this now as a teenager to build my bones so that I can compete college track and field, which is something I wanted to do. Right.
Right.
So I think expressing that's the biggest thing. And again, how do we keep our hormones? We don't all need to go see an endocrinologist or anything like that. It does come down to what I said before, not restricting your diet. If you are in reds, or you lower your caloric intake, or maybe you keep your eating the same, but you just like way bump up your exercise, where you're in this deficient state, estrogen will drop and you won't build your bone. And that's, we want to do as much as we can in our teenage years. Now, for anybody listening to this who is over the age of 18 or has had a diagnosis of like low bone mineral density or has had bone injuries before, all is not lost. There's a lot of improvement that you can do. Just because the average person builds 90% of their bone mineral content before age 18 doesn't mean that you can't build more at age 25 or 30. And even beyond. It does get harder as you age, but we actually still have a lot more research to do in that area. We really, really do. So I don't want to speak prematurely on that. Most of our research on low bone mineral density is in a category of people with post-menopause or who already have osteoporosis. And it's like, well, what about the 40-year-old female athlete who has had irregular menstrual cycles for the past 20 years and has had a few stress fractures? Like, there's a lot of work that can be done there, and we're really lacking on research there. But I have seen in my practice and my clients that as long as we eat enough, get out of reds, have a balanced diet, enough calories for sure, enough protein and carbohydrates, calcium, vitamin D, and we obtain a regular menstrual cycle, bone mineral density does improve. When bone mineral density improves, then those bone injuries you're going to reduce the risk of that, right?
So I think speaking on the menstrual cycle and in teens, I think there's a lot of education that needs to be done to parents. As a coach in gymnastics, competitive high level, there's so many times you would hear the parents say, oh, well, it's never been regular. That's just her.
Yeah.
That's just how her body is. And it's like, but that's not normal. And are there some people that have irregular, like naturally, and are doing all the things? Probably. But I don't know, you could speak on that more, but that's not the average. That's not the norm.
Right.
Like the norm should be once a month, like a regular predictable cycle. But parents don't know that. And then they kind of try to say, like, and if they don't know, how do they fix it type thing? They got first that education there that your child should be on a normal cycle, regardless of their sport, regardless of their activity level. They should be able to maintain that.
I agree. I think we normalized it for so many years to say, oh, she's really active, or she's just an athlete. And we kind of normalize, oh, this happens to athletes. Well, just because it's a common problem doesn't negate the fact that it's a problem, right? And it might even, this is important for all girls, but I might even say the stakes are a little higher for an athlete. It's like somebody not performing in sport only has 6 or 8 periods a year, and that's not good for them either. But we've normalized, oh, it happens to athletes because they're so active. It's like, well, yeah, well, they're the ones stressing their bones, jumping on them, kicking every day. Like, they're the ones who really need their estrogen. Again, I'm not trying to prioritize here. It's important for everybody, but it's like, it's a little bit even more consequential, really. So it's even more important for us to fix this problem instead of normalizing the problem. It's of more importance to fix it.
Absolutely.
And yeah, my personal experiences too, like I did not have exposure to the benefits of a normal menstrual cycle. I was delayed in getting my menstrual cycle, and then it was irregular as well. And my mom, we were aware, but we were just kind of waiting. Oh, it'll come. We waited. And, I won't speak too much to my personal story right now, because in the end, everything was okay for me personally. But I don't think that's what we should be doing now, because just because it worked out okay for me that's not the story for everybody.
Right. Exactly.
You may not have the answer to this. Sorry, Dr. Jess, just a quick question. For those parents out there that may have a high level athlete, what age would you start to be concerned that they don't have it? Like, you were saying,
Sure. Yeah.
for you, what age do we start to be more aware and like maybe start to kind of look into, is this a problem or not?
So technically in the US, we consider it to be primary amenorrhea if you don't have an established menstrual cycle by age 16. In the UK, it's actually age 15. So whatever you want to think, 15, 16, start being aware. I will say though, let's say you got your period at 13 or 14 or 12, and then you lost it and it went away, red flag right away. Right away. If you had it and it went away, go seek help. That's a sign. And versus there are people, because of genetics, that it can be a little bit delayed. Maybe somebody else got it at 12, but you don't get it till 14 and a half or something, or 15. But again, once we're 15, 16, start looking into that anyways.
Yeah. And then when you say seek help, like where would you typically start with that?
So there are a variety of reasons that we might be missing or have not established a menstrual cycle, or that it's gone, even if you had it and then it went away. That's called secondary amenorrhea. There's a variety of reasons. However, if you narrow down the population to adolescent female athletes, it's like 98% of that population, the reason comes down to REDs, underfueling, dietary restriction, recent weight loss. And so 98% is because of that reason. So I would say if you've got a 15-year-old who doesn't have her period, and she's super active in 3 different sports or something, like that's probably it. So with that being said, I would say seek the help of a registered dietitian. I am going to go one step further to say a sports dietitian, because again, this term REDS has been around for 10 years, but like really you want somebody who understands sport. There's a variety, just like everybody has a specialty. There are dietitians who focus on weight loss, and we do not want that in this situation. And by the way, it doesn't mean that this problem is surrounded by weight per se. I'm not saying that all people in this situation need to gain weight or whatever. It's not specific to weight. I'm just saying we certainly don't want a dietitian who's going to have that mindset of less. We don't want that. So a sports dietitian you should seek help from. However, other people you might want to go to, certainly want to establish care with a gynecologist. And there might be some tests that they might do there to rule out other issues, like to make sure we don't have PCOS. You might get lab work done, work with an endocrinologist or just your primary care physician to look at actual hormone levels, estrogen, thyroid plays a role, progesterone. So you can get a full blood work panel from your primary care physician or an endocrinologist, establish care with a gynecologist, and then a dietitian as well, sports dietitian specifically. And like mentioned, some other things too that might come up in this case, just for people's awareness. They might end up doing like an ultrasound of the ovaries to look for cysts or anything like that. They might even do a brain scan or an MRI to look at the pituitary gland in your brain, which is where our reproductive hormones are, many of them are produced and released that affect this whole chain of events. So, there's a few other things that might be ruled out in the process of getting care as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think that when I've seen this in the past, it's funny. Like, I mean, especially like, let's say like 10 years ago, nobody would have ever referred to a dietitian.
No.
Like none of my patients would have been referred to a dietitian. It was always blood work, trying to work with the gynecologist, trying to figure out like what in the world could be wrong with the reproductive system itself, instead of the bigger picture of what's really driving this. And so that's what I've seen that's newer especially within the last 5 years and within the last couple of years of like the healthcare community understanding that somebody trained in food as fuel and medicine is a big missing link to the team members here.
It is. Absolutely. And yeah, I certainly want people to rule out other things, because that's another actual thing in my personal story. I did have an ovarian tumor at age 17. So, or that was identified and removed at age 17. So I am somebody who I certainly want to make sure that we're ruling out, but the very high likelihood in this situation, and it was still for me as well, actually, even after I got that tumor removed, my menstrual cycle was still irregular. And so it's like, okay, so why? What's going on here? And that underlying nutrition piece is just huge for everybody.
Absolutely. And so, and then like diving in, because I just think some of these concepts are really important. So we talked about minerals with bones, but then what about iron? Like, what role does iron play with the female athlete?
Well, male or female, iron is carrying our oxygen throughout our body and our muscles. So it's absolutely going to affect your performance in all types of sport. We're also going to feel it even greater with our endurance type sports. You're going to feel it in all sports, but your endurance sports might pick up on it more quickly, that they're just like not feeling good. For our female athletes, we have a little extra blood loss through our menstrual cycle. But the female body is just so amazing, because when you lose blood through your monthly period, you would think, oh, I'm at a high risk of iron deficiency, but it's actually not. When you're on your period, your body also absorbs more iron out of your food, because your body's so smart like that. But again, if you kind of think big picture now, well, what if I'm a female athlete and I don't love meat, or I'm thinking I should eat more plants instead, or I'm reducing my calories because I'm a bit body conscious, all those things we've talked about that's so easy for female athletes to do for a variety of reasons. They can very easily not be eating enough iron, and then, or not absorbing enough iron. Maybe we're losing more through our monthly cycle, maybe, and then we become iron deficient. Here's one more thing, even though I say we're losing it through a monthly cycle, if you're not getting your period, and maybe you're in a state of reds, your body actually doesn't absorb as much iron when you're in a state of reds, for a variety of reasons. Here, once again, more research is needed, but we have to go back to the root. Why are we in reds? If you're not eating enough carbohydrate, you don't absorb iron, which is crazy. We always think of iron meat. We have newer research saying low carbohydrate intake means you don't absorb enough iron. That's just
but aren't carbs bad?
No, exactly. I know, right?
Right,
so all these things are connected, right?
Well, carbs aren't bad. Like
that's what your brain uses. Your brain uses carbs to work. Like, you need carbs, but you need everything. Like, there's no, I feel like our society has gone to, if I get rid of this, So if I get rid of
Yeah.
carbs, if I don't eat sugar, if I don't do this, if I don't do that, if I only do keto, you know, like if I get rid of this one whole thing, like then I'll be better or I'll lose weight. And yes, like do you lose weight on some of them? A lot of times people do, but it's not healthy. It doesn't mean your body's getting the nutrients. It doesn't mean you're healthier than you were 10 pounds heavier.
Right.
You may even be worse off.
And it's so funny. I feel like, probably the very first lesson I ever learned in my very first sports nutrition class is like carbs are fuel, right? But like you need carbs. And then I continue down this profession. Here I am, more than a decade later. And I'm just like the importance of the fact that carbohydrates play a role in iron absorption is just like, I'm just like, carbs, eat your carbs. Like I will preach it from the mountaintops because it's just so mind blowing to me how interconnected everything is. So you got an iron problem. I'm like, but do you have a carbohydrate problem here? Right. But I still want to stress the importance of high iron foods as well. Your dark red meat, your beans and nuts, surprisingly, raisins. Like there's a variety of foods, the skin on potatoes that have iron, fortified cereals, all that's really great. And so again, going back to like we say, oh, if you as a female athlete, you have your period, you might be losing iron in your menstrual cycle. Well, if you don't have your period, you're also not absorbing iron. So it is just either way, iron for female athletes is important. And we want your menstrual cycle. We don't want that to be a reason to be, thinking that could be negatively impacting your iron. That's not the case. So yeah, and iron, how it is affecting us as an athlete, it's tough because you're gonna feel fatigued and exhausted. Well, what athlete doesn't? And then like frankly, a lot of humans just feel fatigued and exhausted because of lack of sleep, because of stress. So sometimes figuring out if you're iron deficient or not can be a little bit tricky because you might just be like, I need to sleep more, I need to eat more, I need to reduce my stress. And you probably do need to do all of those things. But at the end of the day, you can also get your blood work done at least once a year. For high level athletes, I might recommend twice a year just to check in on not just your hemoglobin and hematocrit, which are your red blood cells, but also your ferritin, your transferrin, so your stored iron, your iron utilization, and get all those numbers to make sure that you're not heading. And you in that way there, if you're doing it once a year, ideally twice a year, you can catch it before you become anemic. You might be, ooh, I'm a little iron deficient. Okay, let me focus on this a little bit more, or address the problem before it becomes a problem.
As you're talking about this, I'm thinking back to my own history and it kind of just hit me, light bulb. Like I always have had issues with iron. So there's been times in my life where I'll go and they're like, you need to take iron supplement. Not one time has anyone ever suggested I look at my nutrition. It was just, here's the pill, you need to take it, which is, I don't know, just kind of looking back and being like, we're still, and that was, I would say like 2 years ago, I still was told I need to take this pill.
And
Like
so
I
I
need a
think you're an
supplement.
example of it's not working if this is a repeated problem, right? So
Right.
I do recommend supplements for many of my clients in a variety of situations, but we have to still look at the foundation because you take the supplement. What if it doesn't get absorbed? What if you're not utilizing it properly? Then didn't do any good.
But
And so many people do just jump to, oh, I'll just take the supplement to fix it. I do recommend iron supplements often, but we need to address the fueling,
the cause,
the
yeah, like,
cause.
and yeah, like, and that just like to me, like, I was like, if you keep coming back to it
And it's not working.
as a practitioner, I would think, and I don't know why I didn't think of this, but I think like you just
Yeah.
go to the doctor, they do your blood work, they tell you to take this, you do, they go back, it looks fine. And then eventually, I don't want to live on pills. They tell you just to take it for a certain amount of time. Then I get off, and then we're back, and it's like it's
Yeah.
this broken wheel, and I'm going around and
Yeah.
around. And
Yeah.
not, but what amazes me is not one time in this whole 39 years, um,
Yeah.
has anyone ever said, "Let's look at your diet." They're like, "Are you eating?" Like, I know what's in the iron, but no one's ever been like, "Are you getting enough from your food source?"
Yeah. Well, hopefully this
Now
conversation has
I'll
helped
have to pay
you.
attention to it. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not a huge fan of apps to track your nutrition. However, in a situation like this, you might want to just for a week if you have a sophisticated app like Nutritionix that looks at iron content, like,
Mhm.
you know, you might want to track your food for a few days and see, am I getting, how much iron am I reaching 100% or not? And then look at the days that you were super low. Why? What did you eat? The days that you were higher, what did you eat that was higher? It's like, oh my gosh, you know, so many people like cereal, for example, like people don't eat, some people who are health conscious, air quotes around that, might stop eating cereal. It's like, actually, it's a great source of fortified iron. Or like, we're always trying to get fresh veggies. It's like, you know what? You put some frozen spinach in a quiche, boom, you've gotten so much iron, right? So it's really, you might be surprised where your iron comes from. Tablespoon of cocoa powder, put that in your oatmeal, you're going to boost your iron. So it's actually kind of, it can be kind of fun to figure out what foods help you reach the amount that you need.
Yeah. And I like that there's different ways of doing it, that it can be different for everybody, because somebody might not like spinach, but they might like something else. And there's like, just, it's not a one size fits all approach. The whole point is, what do you like and what can you realistically implement and still get the results that you want? And I think that's the importance of working with somebody that knows these answers. Because like,
Yeah.
there's only so much like Google searching you can do. And then if you're still hitting a brick wall, I do think that is when it's time to work with somebody that is a professional, that has lots of experience and training. And I think, you know, that's why we like talking with people like you, Lindsey, because your knowledge base is going to be like, it's going to move somebody forward so much faster than if they're just sometimes trying to go it alone.
Yeah.
Going it alone will get you partway, and it might be fine. It might be. And if it's not, then reach out, right? So reach out and ask somebody that knows more than you, in some way, shape, or form, what do you think? And if they can give you like, hey, I think X, Y, and Z, and this is my training and what I'm bringing to it, and it's specifically geared towards you as an individual human, not you as a category of people, but you as an individual human, that probably is a good person to start working with. You know, it's not the one size fits all approach.
Absolutely.
And we definitely want to like, we'll be tagging Lindsey's information. So if there's anybody that has interest in learning more about her, we'll have all of that in the episode description, which I think is helpful. So like, it's, who is this person? Maybe like you could help, you know, their daughter, themselves, somebody that they know. So if you've heard this episode and you hear like, wow, I'm really kind of picturing somebody in my life or myself, then share the knowledge. The only way that this word starts to spread, because REDS is really quite common in the female athlete. Again, we don't want to say like, hey, I think you have this. Like, hey, like I was learning about this. It was really interesting. I had no idea. And like, maybe you find it interesting too. Like there's ways that you can say like, just, you know, sharing knowledge in a non-judgmental way. And you know, that we can all move forward from there. So if you like this kind of information, you know, subscribe, you know, so that way you can, you know, continue to learn more. And you know, stay tuned, everybody, because we've got more things coming out each and every week. All right, bye.
Thank you.